So is this the kind of stuff you're I saw you there with Chris Costa. Is this the kind of stuff you're teaching with him, or how's that working?
Chris and I didn't have a working relationship. We haven't established like parameters. It was actually kind of a fluke that we ended up on the same course together. Chris was giving a class to a private customer, and I was also giving a class to that same private customer. So we just ended up on the range together and did some shooting, and it was a real privilege to shoot with him. He's an outstanding firearms instructor. I think Chris gives a phenomenal course. If you get an opportunity to take one of his classes, I highly recommend it. A no-nonsense guy. I was really, really happy to hear his technical perception of how firearms should be handled. He has a very no-nonsense approach. He streamlines and cuts through all the BS, and he's driven by effectiveness. First one on target wins the gunfight. I mean, that's the bottom line when it comes to the difference between gunfighting and going out on the range and just shooting some targets. So I definitely was very pleased to see his teaching skills and his mindset and his approach is very, very effective. Good dude.
Yeah. So what would you recommend to the person out there that doesn't necessarily have a range where they can be dynamic? They only have ranges around them that are either indoor ranges or their static position. What would you recommend as far as increasing skills in that kind of situation?
Well, I'll tell you what. Probably the worst place is TV. The absolute worst place. And there's very, very few things that I've seen on TV that made any tactical sense whatsoever. The one place that stands out as a solid reflection of good tactical, effective weapons manipulation was in the movie Collateral with Tom Cruise. I think we probably all know what I'm talking about. When he's approached by two assailants, he's got a concealed cover sports coat, and he has a gun to his face. And his response to that assailant was textbook perfect. The way that he transitions, he takes his hand out, knocks away the pistol, creates an open shooting platform for himself, sweeps his cover aside, his shirt aside, his jacket aside, does an excellent draw, fires low and close to his body initially at a close confrontation, marries up multiple targets, shares the wealth for them, puts them down really fast. I mean, that is something that he learned from a professional, learned and practiced until he honed it to that speed. I think that speed comes in time, so I think a lot of people see something like that and they go, wow, and the first thing they want to do is they want to practice it at speed.
Yeah.
And that is a mistake.
Right.
The way that you get good at something is first you understand the necessity for it to exist. So you go, well, why would he even do it that way? So you're understanding, or you're basically processing the need for that movement, and then you have to understand why each movement was done that way. So it's really difficult for a layperson without any professional guidance to understand that or to see it, because there's a lot of things happening in that shot where you don't see it, you don't understand it, you don't catch it because you're not trained to catch it. So all you're seeing is that he drew out a pistol and he shot. But you talk to any person who's trained, and they'll look for those particular points where he did the right thing at the right time in the right way.
Right.
And in that movie, that is an excellent representation. I think that anyone that buys a firearm should have some formal training. What would be good formal training? Well, I mean, it really depends. It depends on your skill set and your budget, unfortunately. But there's a lot of good courses out there that you can take. Chris Costa's class is outstanding. I don't know what his classes run, but he teaches very, very effective dynamic movements. You can go to some ranges and buy lessons where they'll give you basic safety precautions and how to load, unload, draw, holster, and shoot your weapon system. Those are all great baselines. Nobody certainly would say that would put you at a combat effective state by any means. I think the internet is a great source of information as well. Everyone is extremely verbal about what they like and what they don't like on the internet. So you can post a technique about drawing your pistol, and you'll have 200 different responses, and all 200 of those responses have possibly a valid reason why they think that they just saw the worst pistol draw in the world versus what they do and why it's so much more effective. So I think with a little bit of effort and research, you could definitely pick up on a skill, a technique, I should say, because there is a difference. And that's something that I think is really important. There's a difference between a fundamental and a technique. There's a lot of techniques out there, but the fundamentals should be the same. The fundamentals are the foundation of accomplishing what you're set to accomplish. So weapon safety being a number one priority in those fundamentals is treating every weapon like it's loaded at all times. Right. And we have a whole host. There's 5 different rules for using a firearm, but if that number one rule applies, that's all that matters. Treat every gun as if it was loaded at all times, and that will create a tremendous amount of credibility in the people that you train with and the people that train you, and it'll keep your family safe. So that's really, really important. Yeah. But getting online and taking a look at some of the pros, Instructor X does some pretty sexy videos. I think that he's up in the upper 2 percentile of speed and marksmanship. I wouldn't say that's a good starting point, but that's certainly a place to look at to see what you can accomplish with good training. And don't underestimate the value of dry firing. And dry firing is pretty much as exciting as it sounds. It is without ammunition, but what you can get is you can get little rubber bullets that will actually cycle into your weapon, and then you can manually manipulate and unload, load, do the drills that you can, because that's really where you develop what's called muscle mechanics and fine-tune your ability to move your gun in space around you. The rule of thumb is that you want to manipulate your weapon in the same place that you would clap your hands, right, in that workspace area, because it gives you a visual enablement to look at your target area. You're now not drawn away from the fight by looking down at the ground, but little things like that make a big difference, and I think those things get missed. But I think beginners should definitely pursue enhancement in their firearms training.
Yeah, as far as instructors go, at least on the videos I make, I try to make sure that I point people towards the guys that aren't saying they're experts. I like to associate with guys who are like, hey, this is what I got, maybe it can go in your toolbox, keep in the back of your brain if, it's not something for you. What do you recommend as far as someone who's looking for an instructor? Say like, I was just saying they don't have a range where they can go around and run around and do dynamic stuff. If they're going to drive to a state or two away to go to a course, what instructor skill set and personality would you recommend?
I think that the skill set and personality is pretty important. Every person is different. People are attracted to different kinds of things, and they're drawn to different types of personalities as well. So some people are really drawn to people that are a little bit more reserved, a little more quiet, not very showy, boasty, keeping things very simple. Other people are drawn to people that have very, very sexy weapons and very aggressive, assertive. They move very fast, and they're aggressive in the way that they carry themselves. So I think developing that character, symmetry, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, I think that's really important as well. But I think that the most important mentality that a student should have is that you're going to take something away from everybody, irregardless of who they are. Because I think I've witnessed myself several classes that I was less than impressed with by people that made the class seem like it was going to be tremendously beneficial to me. And I caught myself during breaks kind of going, man, I feel like I'm wasting my time. And I think that's a very immature attitude. Right. And I quickly corrected myself, and I decided that I was going to, no matter what happened, even if I was going to learn techniques that I would never use, what I would do is I'm going to walk away from this class and learn something. So I think if you walk into a course with that mentality, you won't be disappointed. But if you walk into it with expectations to come out of there like a gunslinger, you're not going to become Billy the Kid after a 40-hour course. But what you will do is if you walk in there with an open mind like a sponge and just absorb everything that you can, you're going to learn as much as you can. And some of it might apply to you and some of it might not. You mentioned, something for your toolbox. I might teach you something that you'll never, ever, ever use, and it was your favorite thing that you ever learned. However, you might learn something from me that you don't like very much, but it happens to be something that you've used on more than one occasion. So I think that there's a certain amount of humility that goes into being a student, especially if you're not a kid, especially if your instructor is younger than you. That a lot of people go, well, I mean, he's a kid, he's 20 years old, what could he possibly teach me? I'm a 40-year-old, successful businessman. How is he going to teach me something? So I think all those conceptions need to be wiped away. Those preconceptions need to be abated, set aside. So I think the first attitude that needs to be checked is the attitude of the guy taking the class. And then when you go and approach an instructor, I think what they how they present themselves is important. I think, like you said, if they present themselves as a subject matter expert or a professional gunfighter or some rubbish like that, I think that you should be a little bit more weary. Talk to them about what they are good at, and then talk to them about what it is you want to learn. What are your weaknesses? You're the only one that's going to know that. So if you haven't mastered how to sweep your clothing aside and get a firm, positive grip on your weapon, and then draw it out in a safe way and effectively closely engage targets, then maybe those are the things you want to talk to them about. Say, hey, these are my weak points. Are these things that you're comfortable teaching me? And it'll become pretty apparent when they start talking to you about how they're going to help you. So you're almost like doing an interview with your instructor if you have the luxury to do so.
Right.
The last place you want to see that your instructor is a bad fit is when you've already paid your money and you've traveled to the range and you're sitting there and you're taking his class. So I think a good instructor will talk to you and tell you why they think they're a good fit. And maybe they know a person that's a better fit.
Yeah, and all the instructors and I guess personalities I've come across, if someone's unwilling to kind of talk to you until you get to the range, that's a red flag to me. If they can't talk to you about what's going on.
I think that's totally true, because my sole purpose for being an instructor is not to make money. I make money because I have bills. I make money because I have kids and I have to pay, to take care of them. So that is a byproduct, but I'm good at what I do because I truly want to transfer that knowledge to my students, whether it's a soft student or a foreign international, agent that needs refinement in his tactical skills. So I think you hit it on the nail right there. And if they're not willing to talk to you unless they're on the clock, that's not a good sign.
Yeah. So we'll kind of finish up with a few questions here. So we're talking about instruction and going to classes. We're talking about guns. You were saying how you're a guy of a few guns, and then there's obviously guys out there who have a ton of guns. As far as building a gun, would you recommend someone build 3 guns of lower quality parts so they have 3? Or would you recommend someone build 1 gun that's just going to work every single time, it's made of quality parts, etc.?
Well, I think there's no point in having a firearm that isn't reliable. In my opinion, I should be able to give my weapon system to the most important person in my life and know that it will operate.
Right.
That's kind of the way that I feel about it. I don't like buying things twice. I don't like having to replace things that were poorly purchased in the first place. So I typically go the extra mile and spend the extra dollar to buy what I feel is the best of that particular selection that I'm looking for. So to answer your question, I think that a smart choice would be to thoroughly investigate what it is you want to do with that weapon system. If it's specifically for clearing, rooms and small spaces, no targets beyond 400 meters, and then maybe an SBR, a short-barreled rifle, might be the way to go. Other people that do more of a combination of, hunting and long-range shooting, maybe you want to stick with the 18 or 20-inch barrels. So I think once you identify what it is that you want to do with that tool, because that's exactly what it is, then the saying is, the right tool for the right job. That applies here more than anywhere else. I think you should identify it, but then and then try to make it reasonable. It doesn't have to be, if you're talking about putting a rifle together, you shouldn't be spending, $3,000 for a rifle without a scope. I think there's a balance there. There's some guys that have the money and they can burn $5-6 grand on a rifle and put another $2 grand into a scope or $3 grand into a scope. I don't think that's the majority of the population. I think that most guns that are coming off the line have so much competition between other manufacturers that most of the guns that are coming off the line, they perform in a very, very strong way. You're not going to have a lot of malfunctions. I would say that probably 90% or more of the malfunctions are induced by the operator, whether it's a poor magazine seat or poor round selection or putting components together that were not meant to go together. Those are usually user error. So I would venture towards a rational buy rather than the most expensive thing that I can find for every piece of my rifle. But having a good base is really, really important. So research your manufacturer, take a look at their reputation, see how long they've been making guns, and do your research before you start spending your money.
Yeah, I think nowadays, I mean, with the internet, there's a lot of people who are willing to give reviews on on the guns they've purchased. So I think nowadays is probably one of the better times.
I think the wealth of knowledge right now is outstanding. I think there's no excuse for someone to not understand what they're buying, and like you said, it's just too easy.
Yeah. All right, so we'll finish with this. If you have $1,200 to spend, would you spend $600 on a rifle and $600 on a course, or would you spend $1,200 on a gun?
That's a tough one. Are we going off of me specifically, or if I was like any guy that likes to shoot?
What would you recommend? Say someone's just getting into it. They want to go buy a rifle. Never really shot one before. Maybe shot one for fun. Maybe at a family gathering or something. What would you recommend someone do as a first-time purchaser?
I think there's no supplementation for the hands-on instruction. I think that is as critical. I would almost venture to say I would rather you go to a range and rent a gun for the day and put more money towards the instruction and getting that. And that way, it's almost like a win-win, because now you're talking about a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience with weapons, but he also doesn't really know what's available to him. So now you go to a range where you can rent a firearm, and now you can get a high-quality firearm either rented from your instructor or rented from the range itself, and you can say, hey, I don't even know if I'm going to like this. So before I spend $600 or $1,200 or however much amount of money on that, I'd rather spend $50 a day and rent it and shoot the rounds through it and see that your training is working for me and that I can apply it in a tactical sense, and then go, hey, you know what? I really, really like this platform and I want to do it. Or you go, man, I don't think that was a good gun for me.
Right.
And I'd rather not. So I think there's opportunities where you can do that if you seek them out. I know there's some ranges. When I lived in Virginia, Silver Eagle Group was a range that enabled you to do that. You could rent a firearm and go out there and shoot it. And it was because they sold firearms. So it was in their benefit for you to go, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to fire a Desert Eagle.
Yeah.
And they fire it. They go, you know what? It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Let me fire something more reasonable. and so they had a vested interest in allowing you to try different firearms before you actually purchase them. So I thought that was a really good way to go. Cool.
I totally agree with that. So that's pretty much all the questions I had. We definitely made it over close to an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all your links down below that you'll let me know where to have people catch you at, and make sure that they get over to you. Thanks for your time. I know you're extremely busy, and we'll see where it goes with moving on with your fame.
I enjoy it, man. I enjoy talking to you, and I enjoy talking to the guys. I enjoy getting the feedback from the interviews that you post. And hopefully in the near future, you guys will see me, battling more poachers with this team from VetPaw. If you guys haven't had a chance to look into them, they're doing it's like a win-win. They're taking veterans that are unemployed and taking those skills and applying them to an area that requires it. So pretty awesome of Ryan and his team to do that. So check those guys out, and I'll keep you guys posted on the new things that come up.
Awesome. I'll put the link down below to that site for you.
Awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your time.
Absolutely, man.